Is that a Supra?
Oh yeah, it is. What's good, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another car review here on the driveway, where today, yes, we are back in the 2021 Toyota GR Supra. But this isn't the fat, full 3-liter premium like what I drove several months back. This is the GR Supra 2.0. What does that mean? Well, unless you've been living under a rock, it means 2 less cylinders, it has about 130 less horsepower, and crucially, it's not only lighter, but also cost, as this one sits, about $8,000 less. So if you're looking to buy a Supra, but you can't quite stretch to nearly 60 grand, this one could still fit the bill because it is just so much fun to drive, even with that detraction and horsepower. What do I mean? Well, let's hit the start button, hit the road, and I'll show you. So I can't lie to you guys, I first fell in love with this Mark V Supra several months ago when I drove the 3-liter premium model. And if you haven't seen that video, of course, click the link in the upper right-hand corner, and that will take you to what I would say is a more exhilarating review of the Mark V Supra overall. When I first got in this one, however, I was a bit downhearted and I didn't have the greatest expectations of it. But I have been proven ever so slightly wrong, because the performance is still there, but I just don't think that a 2-liter twin-scroll turbocharged direct injection 4-cylinder and an 8-speed ZF automatic transmission are really befitting to the Supra's characteristics. I've always known it to have a snarling, growling, sometimes twin turbocharged inline 6-cylinder engine, and usually a manual transmission. Get the hint, Toyota and BMW, this car does not deserve an automatic. Yes, it can get you off the line quicker, but you don't feel as engaged as you would with a manual transmission. Now, power-wise, it's not bad. 255 horsepower and 295 foot-pounds of torque. The only strange thing is, when I drove the 3-liter model, I was able to eke out about 25-26 miles per gallon, and it had a rating of 24 in the city and 30 on the highway. When I read the press kit, even for 2022, Toyota and BMW are still saying the fuel economy level for the 4-cylinder is to be determined. That's kind of worrying, but I can simply push on my indicator stalk here and I can read that over the week that I've had this car, I've averaged about 23 miles per gallon, primarily driving around in the city. Now, if you're expecting the Supra to have any form of comfort whatsoever, this is not going to be like a beautiful, long-distance, quiet GT car. This is more a hardcore, sort of track-focused sports car, and you can feel it, not just in the fact that there is an evident amount of road noise in here. I'm getting on the freeway and I'm only doing about 65 miles an hour, and it is quite loud in here, even though we have smaller wheels and tires compared to the 3-liter model that I drove before. Also, this car is surprisingly lighter. It's about 3,200 pounds or so from what I read, which surprisingly is only about 400 pounds lighter than a BMW 330i. And for the money, I honestly would pick the Beamer over this, because I don't need to go everywhere with a very sort of crammed bucket seat here, even though it does have adjustable bolsters. And of course, I'm not the biggest person in the world, despite the fact I'm over 6 feet tall. honestly, I just would pick something a little more sensible than this as a daily driver. And also, you could get a decently equipped 3 Series for the price of this car, and that still just blows my mind, considering the fact that, yes, it has the heritage name to it. You know, it has the German influence in it. But overall, really the only thing it's got going for it is when you put it in sport mode, you let it downshift a little bit, knock it over into manual, knock it down a couple gears, and then you give it the beans. Woohoo! She is still a quick one. I cannot deny that. She will get up and go when you want her to. But as you saw, it didn't slam my head into the seat. It didn't really spur me on to keep going. And let's not forget that just like the 3-liter model, the sound of that engine is partially synthesized. And that kind of perturbs me a little bit. Now, I know I spoke a lot about sort of negatives about the driving experience, but let's not forget that this is supposed to be Toyota's flagship sports car. And although the performance from the 4-cylinder isn't exactly what I want in a flagship 2-door sports car, there are some things that are. So let's head back to our favorite little spot and go talk about the looks and the details. Now, as you guys have seen, I've driven some pretty cool cars over the years, but the Supra still remains in one of the top 3 cars that I've driven that turns more heads no matter where it goes. And it's not just down to the nitro yellow that this car is wearing on the outside, it's down to the overall styling. This thing looks literally still like the FT1 concept car that inspired it all these years before. And I mean, you look at it from the front, you have 6 individual LEDs comprising your high and low beams. These are automatic adjusting headlights with the LED daytime running lights and turn signal here on the bottom. You have the LED corner lenses as well. Of course, we can get past things like the fake vents. I'm still not a fan of those. But you notice right along the front here, we also have the front and rear park assist sensors. That's part of the safety and technology group we have in place on this one. But you see the 3 air intakes, of course, the large one in the middle and the 2 smaller ones on the outside. And actually, if you come over here to this side, you notice there's this little blocked off piece on the upper part of this little intake. That is part of the safety and technology group that I was just mentioning, which gives you things like the advanced radar cruise control, forward collision warning, automatic emergency braking, and pedestrian detection. Now, as I said in my last video on the Supra, this car is not big by any stretch of the imagination. On paper, it's 172.5 inches long, and it almost kind of follows a rule of thirds. About a third of the car is taken up by just the front half up to the firewall. You have a decent sized greenhouse with only 2 seats, as any Supra should have, and you have a decent sized trunk in the rear. But overall, I love the proportions of this thing. It's a very elegant, it's a very smooth looking car, but it also has that very aggressive sportiness to it as well. Now, speaking of sportiness, I love these. I really gave praise to the 19-inch wheels that were on the 3-liter premium model, but even here, these 18-inch wheels, these bi-tone wheels with the gray on the inside, machine face on the outside, I really love how they set this car off. It really just adds to the appearance overall, just as much as the 19s did. Now, these have 255 40 section Michelin Pilot Sports in front, and you have 275 40 section Michelin Pilot Sports in the rear. Of course, you have 4-wheel ventilated disc brakes, although they're not the Brembo kit like you would find on some upper end trims. Now, as small as the Supra is lengthwise, down the side, the features list is even smaller. Of course, we still have the little gripes with the fake vents here on the top of the hood, the large one going up the middle of the door. I still just wish they were functional. It would have added maybe a little more aerodynamics to the Supra overall, despite its curvy and low slung shape. But down the side here, you can see both the A-pillar and the exterior mirrors have both been given the gloss black treatment. The mirrors themselves do have a power folding mechanism in them. So as you can see, I have them in right now because the vehicle is locked. They do have the LED turn signal on the side. They are equipped with blind spot monitoring with rear cross traffic alert. Again, that's a part of that safety and technology package. And just like any Supra should have, it does have the advanced keyless access. Now, as I said before, BMW calls this system comfort access, but really to Toyota, it's just an advanced keyless access. So you have this BMW style key with the Toyota logo on the back. You have unlock, lock, release the trunk, and panic with the releasable key blade that comes out of the bottom, which can be used to, say, lock the glove box or unlock the car should the key itself lose power. Now, to unlock the car, you just grab the handle as normal.
you can go ahead and open the door. And as you can see, once I unlock the vehicle, the mirrors will automatically fold out. And to lock it, there's a little rib here on the inside of the handle. You just touch your finger to it. Of course, when you come around to the backside, you really see more FT1 than, say, a Mark IV Supra. I still love the back end of this car. I love the little lip along the trunk lid here, or boot, as people over the pond might call it. There still is more of that fake ventness going on back here right next to the taillights, but speaking of, the taillights are full LED, as you would expect. The reverse light is actually hidden down here in the bottom of the bumper, but of course we have things like the backup camera hidden just under the Supra badge, which I still love that. You also have the Gazoo Racing badge down here on the lower right. You have the rear half of that park assist going along the bottom of the bumper here with sort of that matte black finish. I actually really like that. And in typical Supra fashion, it does have a dual exhaust, but it's not as loud or as raucous as the 3-liter model. But for a 4-banger, it doesn't sound half bad. So at this point, I probably know what a few of you are thinking, which is, I know the Supra is a pretty car, but how practical is it? Not a question many people ask, but in case you're curious, you can open the trunk using either the key or the button on the inside of the driver's door. And first off, when you open the rear trunk, instead of just an itty-bitty little cargo space like you might find on something as inexpensive as a Miata or as expensive as an LC500, the Supra actually has some pretty decent cargo capacity. 10.2 cubic feet of space just here in the back. Of course, you do have a little pass-through right here, which you can actually expand if you decide to remove or take down this little parcel shelf back here. But I was actually surprised when I first saw this, because I kept thinking, if I just close the trunk for a second, that the Supra's trunk was just this little area here, but instead I was very much surprised when you open the trunk and you actually have a decent amount of capacity back there. Now, as much as the outside of the Supra really tries to differentiate itself from its BMW counterpart, when you look inside, you can really see this car's German influences. I mean, just look in here. The seats, not so much. I really do love them though. One gripe I have is I wish the center part here was meant for a racing harness. Would have been kind of cool to have something maybe back there, but instead it's all blocked off in the middle. The seats in this 2.0 have the micro suede in the middle with the black leather on the outside. I love the contrast of the red and gray stitching. I really think that looks absolutely fantastic. They are manually adjustable, so your manual recline, manual height adjustment. You do have power bolster adjustment though, which is kind of nice, and also power lumbar support, and also manual distance control at the bottom. But pretty much everywhere else around this interior, it just looks like a BMW parts bin special. Now, despite the Supra using primarily a BMW interior, when you're sitting in here, you feel like you're in something much more driver focused. The windshield is nice and thin. The visibility out the side isn't that great, especially over your shoulders with that giant C-pillar in the way. But overall, I'm sat low down. I've got this beautiful thin film transistor gauge cluster right in front of me that sort of reminds me of something out of the new GR86 and BRZ, with the center mounted tachometer, the digital displays on either side, and some of the controls for that screen are here on the steering wheel, despite it being, yet again, a BMW steering wheel. Here on the left, all these are for your dynamic cruise control, things like your speed adjustments and so on. You have a few little radio modes and volume buttons and things like that, and your hands-free Bluetooth with voice recognition. Same thing with the airbag cover. If this was replaced with a BMW badge, I don't think anybody would be the wiser. But you also have the paddle shifters here on the back, which are painted a nice metallic silver, but they don't have that nice metallic feel. I would have expected something maybe a little bit nicer, but overall they still get the job done with the 8-speed ZF transmission in here. Underneath the steering column, you do have your manual adjuster way down here by your knees. On the left indicator stalk here, you actually have the button labeled BC, which can trigger all of your trip information here in the lower right-hand corner of your thin film gauge cluster. And then you have all of your lighting controls over here as well, which are all just push buttons instead of up here on the stock, which I actually really enjoy. You have your parking lights and exterior lighting, the ability to turn the headlights just on, leave them in automatic, or turn them off. Now, if it wasn't obvious enough that this car has some real German influence in it, one of the biggest giveaways for me is not just the design of the interior as a whole, but this, the 8.8-inch high-color multimedia interface screen. And quite frankly, I don't have too many issues with it, apart from the fact that the screen is rather thin, but that's for a reason, because the windshield is very thin as well, and if this thing stuck up a foot high, then you wouldn't exactly have the greatest visibility out of the front. The other thing is that although this system is touchscreen, it has plenty of different functions in it, like the navigation, which we have as part of the options list with the safety and tech package. It also can be controlled through that usual BMW iDrive controller down in the lower console. And if you're someone who likes ease of use, this system is not going to be it. It can be a little easy to use if you use all the touchscreen functions for things like your Supra Connect with like your active weather updates, average vehicle information like average speed and miles per gallon, and service notifications. But if you try to use something like the scroll wheel like I'm using right now, it can be a bit of a hassle. So for starters, I use it to select the navigation. You notice when I touched the navigation icon, the map automatically appeared. But if I use the rotary, I have to go through the entire menu right here, scroll down to map, select it using the rotary selector, and now you can see it comes up. It's a bit of a headache. It's not really something I prefer to use, but it is a good bit better compared to a lot of Toyota's other navigation systems and so on that I've reviewed pretty recently, as I'm not exactly the biggest fan of those. The other thing I'm not a big fan of is the backup camera system. Now, you notice, and as I told you, we do have the front and rear park assist on here, which is nice, but you can't make this screen go away. I've tried swiping it, as you can see, and it doesn't go anywhere. So you have this tiny little backup camera over here on the right, of course, with the adjustable guidance lines, but you also have half the screen being taken up by the park assist color coordinated system. I really feel it's not as necessary to have this in here all the time. I kind of wish it was more only available when needed. But other than that, the system is pretty nice. But also going back to that click wheel, if you want to do things like adjust the brightness or the contrast, you have to go through several different menus in order to get there. And even as you saw, I tried to go back just to that side little menu there, and it took me back to the main screen. So it's not exactly the greatest system in the world, but if you're a bit of a tech head, maybe expecting a little bit more for your near 50 grand Supra, this infotainment system isn't the worst thing in the world. And one of my other favorite little nods from BMW for the Supra is the fact that when you turn on the lights here at night, you see all the buttons and everything down in the lower console and up here in the middle all glow this beautiful iridescent orange. It basically has been in BMWs for an eternity with this color, and I just think that is so cool that they kept that sort of nice orange glow instead of something, say, like a bright white like you might see in the daytime. So even though the infotainment and the climate control and pretty much all the other buttons and stuff you'll see in here are all from BMW, the sound system in here is anything but. The 2.0 with the safety and technology package added on adds the 3-liter Premium's 12-speaker JBL audio system. I'm gonna tell you guys, I still have trouble finding all the speakers in here. There's 2 on that door, there's 2 over here with the little JBL logo on the top tweeter. I think there's one up here behind the nav screen, and I certainly know there's a couple of giant speakers hidden here behind each of the seats. But overall, you push the power button in here and you're in for a pretty nice sounding experience. As I mentioned earlier, pretty much everything in here is focused more towards the job of driving, hence the reason why you don't see 10 zillion buttons lining the middle part of the upper console here and pretty much everything down below. Everything is so easy to use, from the radio bands and presets up here on the top, all the way down to the dual zone climate control system, which unfortunately in this one, we don't have the option of things like heated seats, but you do have your temperature controls either side, fan speed in the middle, different climate zones for either side, inside, front and rear defrost, your AC, air recirculation, basically all the main necessities that you would ever need. You come underneath all of that, and in the last car that I tested, it had a wireless charger down here. Unfortunately, this one being $8 grand less, the wireless charger was one of the things to be taken out of there. So instead, what you get is just a nice little place to rest your phone. You've got one USB down here, along with a 12-volt plug in case you want more USBs to charge your electric appliances. But the other thing that's real BMW is the selector for, again, that ZF 8-speed automatic transmission. It works just like in any BMW product. You've got the park button up here on top. To get into any gear, reverse, neutral, or drive, you just push the button on the side, you pull it straight back, that goes into drive. Push the button, put it all the way up, that goes into reverse. And if you're in drive or reverse, you can just tilt it towards you slightly, that puts the car in neutral. And when you're in drive, you can actually push it over and take control of the gears manually. You push up to go down a gear, pull back to go up a gear. But for me, I'd forsake the stick altogether in favor of the paddles. For storage space in the front of the Supra, there's really not much. Aside from the glove box over there in the passenger side, there's two decently sized cup holders, which I kind of like these little fang-like projections here to hold your drink in place, such as my Coca-Cola bottle turned water bottle that I have here. You also have a nice little storage area here in the back, perfect for, say, your phone, your wallet, maybe a few little odds and ends. But overall, there's really not too much in the way of storing stuff here in the car. Again, this is more of a driver's car, not so much a utilitarian vehicle. Well, unfortunately, everyone, that wraps up our review and drive of the 2021 Toyota GR Supra 2.0. In conclusion, this car, despite the drop in price tag, despite the drop in cylinders, and despite the drop in horsepower, is still so much fun to drive. It really makes you feel like a driver when you want to. It's still reasonably fuel efficient, and you still get the history behind that Supra nameplate. But anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this review, or perhaps you learned something today, please give this video a thumbs up, and also while you're at it, hit the subscribe button down below, because trust me, I do enjoy it. It benefits the both of us in the end, and it allows us more opportunities to get to know vehicles like this. But also, my thanks goes right back to Toyota USA for allowing us access to the Supra once more to have some fun with for a whole week. But at the end of it, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. I'll see y'all next time. Take care, everyone, and stay safe.